Let's continue with our agenda. We are at the action calendar, and the subject is to review Lawrence Mitty Park and Trail project, the final conceptual design, and to consider the proposed initial study mitigated negative declaration. Madam City Manager, we have a staff report, I presume.
Yes, we do. Thank you, Mayor, for the introduction. So we have a item before council for consideration. This will be the conceptual design for Lawrence Mitty Park, and we have an abbreviated presentation by Susan Michaels, the CIP manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. Tonight we will go into the latest design for the Lawrence Mitty Park project, as well as the initial study mitigated negative declaration. Tonight's action is to, it's on.
I think we're signaling you to bring it maybe a little bit closer.
Got it. Thank you. Is that better? Thank you. So tonight's action is to adopt the project's initial study mitigated negative declaration and to approve the Park and Trails project's final conceptual design. Tonight we'll go through the project background, we'll go into the final conceptual design itself, a short summary on the CEQA analysis and report, and next steps. Tonight I'm going to hand it over to the project team's design team. We have MIG. Jan Eisland will go through the design portion of the project, and then Mike Campbell will end with the CEQA and environmental report, and then I will follow up with next steps. Jan?
Thanks, Susan. Next slide, please. First, we want to just do a super quick overview of where the site is. This is the context. We know that in the Park and Rec Master Plan, there is an identification of a need for more park space on the east side of Cupertino, and you can see the Lawrence Mitty site there on the very far right. Next. And here are the existing conditions. We do have the south half of the park on the left side is an existing trail already. And then we have a connection from Sterling Barnhart Park in the middle there, and crossing across the Lawrence Expressway to the park. Those are both pedestrian connections that can get you there. And then the big kind of triangular space where 5 and 6 are is the large open space that's really more of an opportunity site for our park. And then it really narrows down in 7 and 8, as you can see in the pictures, where the creek is very narrow, the path is very narrow, and we're constrained by the expressway and connections to the north. Next. So we started our project with a strong community engagement effort to identify the goals and vision of the community. And we first identified these top features that people wanted to see. And then next slide, we took those into consideration when we came up with 3 alternatives. And the majority of people did choose the second concept shown here. You can see it's called Story Trail, and that really focused more on the creek and natural features. We also found that when drilling down into what were the top features of each of these elements, each of the plans, we found that people wanted to do more of a combination of focusing on the creek and nature and bringing in a little bit more play elements into. So then in the next round, we went into developing the concept plan based on what we heard. And we really focused our attention on that center open space, partly because of budget and partly because that south side is already existing and functioning. We thought this was really the place where the community wanted to see a difference and really use that big open space. So that's where we focused the effort. Next. And here's the final concept. So you can see that overall, the direction of the community is a park with a natural aesthetic. It has walking trails and native plantings and views of the creek and nature play. Just to go over a couple of the elements, we've extended the existing multi-use trail from the left side of the page to the right side and created this meandering bike path and walking path that then ends in a circle roundabout for now. We do expect that in the future there can be a connection further to the north, but that will take some additional coordination and some work that's off of our site right now. So we don't want to hold up this part while waiting for that to happen, but that is something that's identified in the bike and ped plan. So also other trails exist, soft surface trails you can see in that kind of beige, so that people can get up close to the plants and really slow down and enjoy the new native plantings and being next to the creek. And then the little arrows you can see are little deck overlooks or bench overlooks, and then one larger one shown by number 4 there, more of a deck overlook getting closer to the creek. We also have shaded benches, picnic tables, and several play features that really build on the offerings at Sterling Barnhart, which is a small park, and the offerings here are different and can build on what's there. We also have visible stormwater improvements. You can see all along the trail is kind of a green ribbon there. That's the stormwater retention basin, which cleans the water before it goes out into the creek, which currently is not happening. So that will be improved water quality for the creek. And then, as I said, a lot of new native plantings, a lot of new shade trees, a lot of new better habitat. One last feature, or 2 last features I didn't mention was there is a space for a future restroom. It's right where Susan's pointing. So it's right, it has a maintenance access and turnaround so that if funds become available to put in a restroom in the future, we've planned for it, and that's the location. And then also the other feature I wanted to mention was the landscape berm between the bike path and the expressway. So this is a planted berm that does provide noise reduction, and it also creates a nice opportunity to have a visual buffer as well. And quickly, let's look at the last slide of the concept, which does show some example images of some of the things I just talked about. You can see the first 3 are play elements, and then the landscaping, some boardwalk crossings that cross the bioretention there at number 8. And then it looks like the numbers might be cut off, but you can see some deck overlooks, the bike path, the bioretention, and ample seating throughout. So that's kind of the overview, and I'll pass it on to Mike.
Thanks, Jan. Next slide, please. I'll just run you through the basic steps in the CEQA process that got us to where we are tonight for the project. We drafted an initial study and mitigated negative declaration, ISMND for short. Put it out for a 30-day public review period between February and middle of March of this year. We received 5 comment letters during the public review period. And then we put together a final ISMND that included responses to those comments provided and the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. Then we took it to Planning Commission with a recommendation for approval to the City Council. That happened on May 28th. And then we followed that with a Parks and Recreation Commission hearing on June 11th, also with a recommendation to Council for approval. And now tonight is the 3rd and final public hearing where we are again seeking adoption of the MND by the City Council. Next slide, please. This is a list of the environmental impacts that were analyzed in the ISMND. On the left-hand side, there are 3 areas there that the initial study determined the project could potentially have significant impacts on, but that would be reduced to less than significant level with mitigation measures incorporated. Biological resources, we have some special status species that could potentially occur on the site. They're protected by state law, so we need to include mitigation to protect them from impacts of construction of the project. Things like pre-construction surveys, worker awareness training, exclusion barriers and buffer zones, on-site monitoring where necessary. And then for cultural resources and tribal cultural, there are no known resources that occur on the site. But that doesn't preclude the possibility of a discovery of something during the construction process. So to protect potential resources. We also included mitigation for worker awareness training and specific protocols for what to do if resources are discovered during construction. And that's a summary of the impacts. I'll be available to answer the council's questions regarding mitigation or the ISMND. Back to you, Susan.
Thank you, Mike and Jan. For the next steps, I wanted to show you what we have accomplished so far. We did a site analysis, community outreach, design alternatives, and the environmental review, as well as the design. So we're actually done with this image. We'll have to come up with a new one. The next steps include, as we said, this meeting, and then after, if all goes as requested in this meeting, after this meeting, we will go into the next stages of the design and the regulatory permitting, which means since we're on the creek, we will have every agency known to man that will need to have some jurisdiction over our project, so that will take some time. And then we'll, as we go through that, we'll also be doing construction documents and the city permit. We hope to start, go through the bidding and construction process in early 2026 and hope to finish by the spring of 2027. So I will remind you of the action to adopt the Lawrence-Mitty ISMND and to approve the conceptual design. I would also like to note that Commissioner Stanek from the Parks and Rec Commission is here if you have any questions regarding their action, and I know that there's at least one Planning Commission member here as well in a less official capacity, but they also reviewed our project and found it to be in conformance and were supportive of recommending that this be approved. And that is it. Thank you.
Time for council to ask questions of staff. Okay, this is the time when council asks questions of the staff. And let's go with 5 minutes each. Councilmember Moore.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. I have more of a legal question, and perhaps it could be answered in a memo. It's with regards to talking about how you're going to have all these regulatory agencies that you're going to need to go make applications to, basically. And my question is for the city attorney with regards to the Chevron decision that we have just recently seen, if that's going to, down the road, foreseeably have any impact on some of these agencies that we need to get permits from and whatnot, if you can see any impact there or with the Environmental Protection Agency.
I wouldn't see any immediate impact with this project in particular because it's clear that this is a water course where there's both federal and state agency jurisdiction. Longer term, I wouldn't necessarily see much of an impact of from state agencies unless it was a situation where it was a state agency implementing a federal law like the Clean Water Act, which is in fact what our state water board does. I mean, it's a good question. I have not gone through the full scope of permits that would be required for the next phase of this project. I'm sure that our project team has given it some thought, and it will be extensive just given the location. But I wouldn't expect any immediate impact from the Supreme Court's ruling, although it's a good question to ask.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Way.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a quick question for Susan. So how long has the process been, starting with the outreach and from the first time you worked on it till now?
Thank you, Councilmember Way. It depends on what you call the starting point. I believe we started to acquire the property in 2016. Is that correct?
We've been, excuse me, Council, Chad Mosley, Director of Public Works. The city has been looking at this property since around 2002. We've negotiated with the county on and off for years. We received funding from a development project that was utilized for purchasing the property, and that funding was received, I think, in 2017. So we've really made a concerted effort since then.
The design team initiated this stage of the project in 2021.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Fruin?
Do you have any particular lessons learned from your community outreach that you think would be valuable for the next time we go through this?
That is a good question. Thank you. No, I'd have to get back to you on that one. But that's a good question. Thank you.
All right.
So mine is sort of a corresponding question. Why has it taken so long?
So I'll step in. We have had an intense amount of public outreach for this project, numerous rounds with the public. Additionally, during that process, we also were kind of stymied with COVID, which kind of slowed some items down. And we're kind of coming out of that and really kind of pushing along a number of axes. Additionally, just internally, we've had some turnover from staff, and I think Susan's the 4th project manager on this project. So every time we get a new project manager, there's a little bit of a delay, kind of catching back up and then keeping it rolling along. But we have been steady like a turtle, and we're getting there.
Thank you. Councilmember Chow?
Thank you for the timeline for next steps. Looks like there's still a long way to go with all the permitting. So I wonder how much of the funding has been spent and how much remains. Are we on budget?
In the staff report, it was funded for $8.27 million. We have $5.9 million remaining to finish out the project and other costs.
So is that enough to fund the remaining construction?
We have been working with the budget since day one, so we've been working to that budget. Of course, construction costs keep evolving, so we will see how that works out. But we're prepared. We will take it to the next level of design, do more detailed drawings, and get preliminary cost estimates before we go to the next phase.
So we don't know yet?
No.
So one of the comment letter raised the parking concerns in the area. As we know, there is no parking. So I see the response says this is not part of the of this meeting negative declaration. So do you have any comment about the parking concerns?
The parcel has no street adjacent. There's no opportunity to provide parking unless additional parcels are obtained.
And it should be noted that the park is sort of an extension of a trail project for bicycles and pedestrians, and many of the features that have been kind of added to the park are not necessarily destination features, meaning that people from across town are going to be driving to this location to enjoy the park. This is more of a neighborhood park to facilitate the needs of the local residents.
So this impact report is not required to assess parking impact, and
That's correct.
right. But most likely, people visiting the park will be neighbors, and who are within walking, biking distance to the park. Yeah, and then I think the area that's the burn right now, it's a sound barrier between the bike trail and the Lawrence Expressway. Would there be any safety concerns because that area might not be visible to the park user?
Thank you for your question. The public safety is one issue, one topic that has been very vivid in our process throughout, and that has been some of the comments from the residents, so that it will definitely be part of the awareness as we develop the design further. We'll try to make no blind spots. We'll do our best to provide a
thank
safe place
I
for
asked
people.
all these questions in our prep session, but I
Yes.
thought I need to raise that
Yes,
for the
yes.
public who might have concern about those.
Yes.
And then in terms of police patrolling of the park, since there is no direct access, how would that be achieved?
And I can add to that one. The Sheriff's Department has been consulted with up to this point, and there is a maintenance access off of Lawrence Expressway, which would also facilitate emergency access as necessary.
That is also where a potential restroom might be. So that access also would provide, I assume, any cleaning crew for the park that would use the access from Lawrence Expressway.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I had one quick question. Isn't there a homeless encampment in the park? At least there was when I saw it several months ago. And I wondered if that would be something you'd have to deal with before you take the next step.
The city has dealt with encampments a number of times with this property. We have worked with the county to abate in certain circumstances when there were some safety concerns. I don't know the current status of whether there's an encampment there, but if there is prior to construction, we would have to deal with the encampment at that point in time.
Okay. Okay. Let's go to public comments. Any?
Yes, Mayor, I have one request to speak from Jennifer Griffin. I see one hand raised virtually.
Okay, so 3 minutes per speaker. Please.
Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Griffin. I live in Rancho Rinconada. We have been trying to secure this property since 1980. Just from what we went through before, someone wanted to get the property in the 80s to put housing on it. Rancho Rinconada was terrified. We went to the county to try to get the trails put in. They were ready to sell it. This is why we have worked so hard. Years of my life, Pat Bustamante, who now I believe has Alzheimer's, there are many, many people that have tried many, many years to get this property secured. We have been happy to wait. Rancho has no parks. This is my second park. I walked Sterling Barnhart through probably 15 years ago. This property will be built. Even though the housing element meeting was at the same time as the park and rec meeting, I mean, how could that happen? I knew that Apple would not release the money if some stupid plan was being done, okay? The money is tied up in a park that was supposed to be in the footprint of where Apple II campus is. This goes back, I was here the night Steve Jobs announced he was buying all that land. The city had said there was supposed to be a park, Apple bought it, and they had to put money into a contingency group. It was the $10 million. This is where the money is coming from. There will be plenty of money. I do not believe that this money can be used for anything else. I believe that Apple has controlled it the entire time. I am happy with that. It has taken years to get this. My compliments to Rachel and to Chad and to the other wonderful people that worked on this. This was a total collaboration with the neighborhood. We want this park. We love this park. It will be embraced and used for years. It will not have high-density 10-story buildings on it as long as I live there, and I'm going to be there until the day I die, okay? That's it. The parking situation is, it is a neighborhood park, and public cannot access the park from Lawrence Expressway. It's prohibitively forbidden. we have had to work through many different agencies. Prior mayor, oh my God, our darling mayor that was before has worked so hard on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jennifer.
There will be no housing on it. Thank you.
Next, we have Lisa Warren. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. I'm just echoing what I said when Planning Commission got this, and Parks and Rec knows they're doing a great job. It's been a long haul. There's been a lot of steps. Chad's been great and communicative, and Susan, since she came on board, is always awesome. So I think we're in good hands. There was a lot of outreach. I went to several of the events, and they were, I guess, well attended. And I was at many of them, but I didn't see a lot of repeat people. So there was a good swath of public. And I think the ultimate design is appropriate, much more appropriate than some of the choices in the beginning. So I think we're in good shape, and I hope you all agree.
Thank you, Lisa. And we have one person requesting to speak virtually. That is San R. Welcome, San.
Good evening, Mayor Mohan and City Council members. I believe the staff summary may not have adequately communicated the amount of public input that came in on the topic of the restroom. I would urge you to ask follow-up questions on this area, because I know, having attended, I think, most, if not all, of the community meetings, this was a very heated topic with a lot of input coming in on the topic of placing a restroom in the park. Since a park is not usable if you have no restroom, you can't use the park, and especially young families that may have a child that needs to go to the restroom, or parents that may have to take a child that is not yet potty trained to a restroom. Not having a restroom defies logic for the basic needs of a park, and even worse, a workaround of a temporary restroom, if put in, is going to be even worse, because that is not going to meet the sanitary needs of the community. And so I don't believe we should accept an answer that says we don't have money for a restroom. If we can spend $80 million on Memorial Park, tearing down 2/3 of its trees to put back new trees, we can put a restroom in a new park. So let's please make sure that we don't partially fund these projects and not put in basic hygiene requirements for the community. There was a significant amount of input. I didn't hear that from staff at all. I would like to see in these agenda attachments the actual input from the community, including the comments that were submitted. Because absent that, and with the Engage Cupertino site, you can no longer access, once the survey is closed, the actual input from the community. These extensive amounts of time and money that goes into community surveys give us nothing at the end of it if we cannot access the survey results, especially the raw results. So please share that, and let's make sure we design this park with a restroom. Thank you.
Thank you, San. Mayor, no additional requests to speak on this item.
Okay. All right, we are done with the public comment section for this item. Let's bring it back to council and Council Member Moore. 5 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you. So I did notice that there are a number of new trees going in. I'm just making a statement about that I hope that they are tall canopy trees, preferably California natives, to support birds and pollinators in that area, that we have that going on. I do want to find out a little bit more about what San R was requesting regarding having a public restroom there. What kind of feedback ultimately was there on that? Perhaps Commissioner Stanek would like to talk about that as well. My clock's ticking, so.
Very good.
Ms. Warren, come on down. You're using my time.
Okay. What an honor. Okay, so bathrooms. In my opinion, a bathroom is not necessary there. There's a park there already that does not have a bathroom, and it gets used all the time. This is a neighborhood park.
Okay. Thank you. That's enough. And then I wanted to hear from, Susan Michael, if you have some more comments from the public on the restroom issue.
I'll mention during the public outreach, we had folks from both sides, a number of folks in the area who were concerned that they didn't want restrooms in there, with the concern that they may attract certain individuals that they didn't want it to be staying around there, and then others who utilize that area, the trail sometimes, thought that a restroom would be a good idea. So it's fairly mixed bag, almost 50-50 kind of on how that panned out. With that stated, we have created a design that has a placeholder for a restroom should we decide to install one. We've looked at a number of different options. A fully built, installed restroom was somewhere around $1 million, and that's because of the utility connections. So we looked at other options that may be less expensive, and at this point in time, with somewhere around a $5 million budget, we didn't want to use 20% on one item. We decided to look and see what we could do to create more options for the park. Build it, and they will come, and at some point in the future, if we find a need for a restroom, we can do that later.
Okay, thank you. And I do recall that and I don't know if the price has gone up, but the inclusive restroom, the ADA restroom at Jolly Man, $850,000. So I'm not really surprised to hear the $1 million on this one. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion. Vice Mayor Fruin?
I'd be happy to move the staff recommended action.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. There are no further discussions. Let's vote by lights, please.
Okay.
Oh, hang on.
Oh, sorry. I think another point the public member mentioned is the survey results from the Engage Cupertino sites. I think we have a lot of documents now on Engage Cupertino. Once the project is closed down, would we move those documents to a city site?
I think we could probably follow up on that. That's a bit outside the scope of the agenda.
There's a good amount
Okay.
of documentation on both city websites.
Mm-hmm.
We can consolidate that in the long run, yes.
Yeah, that would be great. And so so for the Jollyman Park restroom, it's an expansion of the current restroom, so that already has all the utility hookups, right? And
The costs are for different reasons.
oh,
This
okay.
is for this one, the reason
for
it's
this
expensive is
one-
the utility connections.
Even with the utility connections, it's about 1 million. I thought it might be more, but 1 million will be enough.
I think that the Lawrence Mitty bathroom is quite expensive. We did a rough estimate, knowing what we know. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because it currently doesn't have any utility hookups.
Correct.
We have to bring everything in. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, so we do have a motion and a second, and we should vote by lights.
The motion carries unanimously.
Right. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 9. Repeal of the existing general plan amendment, authorization procedure and process. Madam City Manager, should we
Thank you,
start
Mayor.
with the staff report?
As we're setting up the presentation, just want to give a little introduction to this item. This is a companion item to be considered as part of the housing element effort that we're asking council to reconsider this current existing process to bring a general plan amendment application preliminary review to council for a green light before any applicant can submit a formal application to planning for approval. In an effort and also in a spirit to streamline the general plan amendment process, we're taking this item to council for you to consider to remove this process. I think I summarized Ben's presentation in the 30 seconds, but he can do a better job than I did. Take it away, Ben.
Thank you, Madam City Manager. That's my presentation. Thank you very much. Good night. I just have a few slides to share with you. Thank you for the introduction, Madam City Manager. Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council Members, Ben Fu, Director of Community Development. Tonight, like City Manager had introduced, it's a general plan amendment authorization process. And here you go. All right. As Manager Wu indicated, as staff endeavored in this housing element update effort, we also examined some of the existing procedures to support a policy and clarify some potential misconceptions or observations of potential hurdles, obstacles for housing developments. So the general plan authorization process was adopted in 2015. Procedure was intended to address some of the council and community input, that being more orderly developments to ensure additional development improved quality for life of the community, provide opportunity for early input to avoid unnecessary, complex, costly, and time-consuming processes. Here is a graphic of the GPA workflow. It's included in the staff report as an attachment. It shows what happens if the project is authorized versus not authorized. As you can see from the right side of that workflow, it's entirely a separate processes built on top of the existing GPA process. If the project is denied, then a new application can come back for 1 year unless some minor amendments are produced within 30 days. And I will also mention a GPA process itself on the left side of that graphic also has a 1 year period if it's denied by council. Here, prior to the authorization procedure in 2015, this is a pretty standard process as indicated in the Government Code 65358 that cities may amend the general plan up to 4 times in 1 calendar year. Typically, we review applications concurrently with the process. What that means is we receive an application, we'll review it, we'll produce a full set of materials and staff recommendation with a staff report to council. Public input is solicited through noticing for meetings and signage and neighborhood meetings as well. And upon completion of review, of course, then public hearings are held, first Plan Commission and then the City Council. Reason to repel this, as we're looking at the process, there's what we have heard and gathered from the public is that there's some misunderstanding of the GPA project approval process. There's some misunderstanding that once they got the authorization, then the project is therefore approved. So, there's some unclear expectations about what the project will supply in terms of development agreements. For example, there's also as I showed in the graphic and a couple of slides ago, it's entirely separate processes. So therefore, there's an increased overall project review time and also resources, both from the city's perspective as well as for the project's perspective. And there's this misconception that there's a quid pro quo kind of for private developments. City gets something and you get the approval for the project. So therefore, what we're recommending tonight is that council adopt a resolution to repeal the existing general plan amendment authorization procedure and process and rescind resolution 15-078. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Fu. Any questions for staff? Councilmember Moore, 5 minutes, please.
Okay. Thank you. So I was wondering, what are the last projects that we've had that have gone through this process?
Sure. I think as indicated in attachment D, we have a list of, I believe, 9 projects dating back to 2015. So the very last project was the Homestead Homes that came to council, I believe, in 2021, summer 2021. So that's the most recent project that we had in 2021.
Okay, so I'm looking at the two hotels that we recently granted the extension on, and they did, I believe, have general plan amendments. So I'm sorry, I don't have the list
It's okay.
Did they have to have
They did,
go
yeah.
through this process?
I believe it came through in 2017. Came in front of council in 2017, the first time when they went through the process.
Okay, so now basically they're not going to have to go through that process in order to have the amendment. They're just going to.
Right. So the authorization really is kind of like a gatekeeper process, if you will. The council will indicate to the developer, yes, you can submit for a GPA process, or no, you come back next year. So what this does, it does not take away the project's ability to go through a general plan amendment process. It just takes away that initial gatekeeper process.
Could it possibly, let's say the council did not want to approve one of those two hotels for whatever reason, they thought it was too tall or it was too close to the street or something, is it possible that the developer could end up spending more money up front, putting forth a design, getting too far along with that process, and then only to have the council say, no, we don't agree with your plan set?
It's possible, but for those hotel projects, for example, they did have to come forward with a realistic project. So it's assumed that pre-development phase was already completed when it went through the authorization process.
Okay, and to that point, we've made some changes to the fee structure, I believe, so that the pre-development phase now, since you're changing this process around, we're considering it. So instead, we are not going to have a developer then come to the city multiple times making changes to a project and have that cost be taken up by the city planning department. You've increased or created some fees to cover that. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. We have a few sort of pre-development fees, like project review meeting, for example, or preliminary review meetings. We have those kind of fees to provide some additional advanced feedback for the project to developers.
Okay, so that we're not going to get caught in this process and end up having to pay for it. And still, they're going to go to staff, and you'll have conversations so that you have an understanding of the council and for what would get approved and those type. Well, perhaps you could share a little bit about that process. How does that actually work within the planning department when someone brings in a project?
Yeah, I mean, right now what we provide is a complimentary process. Some projects, an applicant wants to come in, they want to talk to staff. We arrange a meeting ranging from 30 minutes to an hour, free of charge. We supply very comprehensive project review requirements. That's composite of planning, building, code enforcement, fire requirements, what have you. And that's a complimentary sort of free process to provide that advanced requirement so the applicants can go back and modify their projects and submit for an actual permit. We'll go through development review process. So what we produce, we're not exactly with this process, but what we have introduced in the fee study is a fee for that process itself to provide that early advance notification of the requirements. Very similar to the authorization process where the developer would get that advance notice of the city's requirements and council's desire for certain items, for example, whether it's design, whether it's setback, whether it's development agreements items.
Okay, so you would tell a developer, we don't think this project as you have this planned is going to be approved by the council. Would they receive that kind of a
Yeah, I mean, it's always
feedback?
Our preference that project comes through a standard process as opposed to coming through a GPA process, but anybody who owns a property and wants to develop, they have that right to go through this process.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Vice Mayor Fruin?
My comments will be very brief, Councilmember Chow. If you wanted to go first, though, I'll yield to you because I think you had yours up first. Okay. Just to pick up on that last comment, that anyone who wants to go through the process has the right to go through it. It sounds to me, though, that the entire way that this is set up could be described as asking for permission to apply.
That's correct.
Okay. Which seems sort of antithetical to the notion of being able to petition the government for redress of grievance. But I'll leave it at that.
Councilmember Chow, 5 minutes, please.
First, I guess some background for this resolution. It was when I first got involved in any city meeting, the last general plan that was proposed, the council at the time put in a lot of 60 feet for a site, but with community benefits, you can go to 75 feet. That was in the proposed general plan, and a lot of community members opposed the community benefit height increase. So the council listened and then didn't include this additional height. But then they thought that they would still want to have some way to allow people to ask for more heights. So I think that then later a council proposed this new process that would allow the council to authorize a general plan amendment, kind of a compromise on the process. And I think at the time, one of the council members who proposed that was also thinking in Mountain View, companies compete for development allocation, and they were hoping that there could be this competing process for getting more allocation, like office allocation, for example, from the city. Then the city might be able to get more community benefit from this competing process. But it hasn't worked out that way. So I think, it hasn't worked out well. But then after we repealed this, as I understand, before that process was adopted, developers were able to also propose general plan amendment. And like the Apple Park project, there was general plan amendment included in the project proposal. For that one was, I think, for the public road that was sold to Apple, it has to be rezoned. So for future projects, I'm guessing, like the hotel project, as I remember, they requested because we have very limited hotel allocation, so they need amendment in order to add hotel rooms. And likely in the future, this kind of amendment for an office building might be necessary. Maybe not this market, but maybe in some other. So if someone, because we have very low office allocation right now, so if someone needs either office allocation or hotel allocation or height increase, likely community won't see that, the council won't see that. The very first chance we would see any kind of amendment will be when the project is already almost complete and then went to maybe planning commission for approval. Would that be then the process we will see?
That would be the process, but I think there's perhaps a misconception of what a complete project means. The project's not really completed until it's received council approval and it's gone through the building permit review process. So at the planning commission review meeting, it is a pre-design, pre-development proposal, and then the commission will provide feedback, and the project still has an opportunity to revise based on those feedback received and come back to the commission again.
So in case someone propose an amendment that the planning commission or the council does not want to approve, they would have to go through the entire process until the very end.
The process doesn't change, whether you have an authorization process in the beginning or you just projects come in and go through the general plan amendment process. They're still being evaluated with the opportunity to make modifications based on the feedback they receive.
The value of the authorization process is the developer can get an earlier feedback on what they hope to request, even though I think it's not a commitment the city will approve that, but at least there is that early feedback. So if someone still would like to get this early feedback, is there a way?
Let me take that question. Thank you, Ben. So along that line, so if a developer proposes a project that is not compliant to our code and come in front of a council and got that green light, they will be giving the wrong conception that they're okay to proceed with this non-compliant project. So if a project complies to the general plan and complies to zoning with their finding, staff will have to make that a recommendation to council to approve it.
Yeah, but if they request an amendment, so
They will have to make finding for us to make a favorable recommendation to council.
even for a general plan amendment, do you
Correct.
have
Yes,
to,
absolutely.
Yes.
you have to make findings to make the recommendation?
Absolutely, yes, that's
Any
correct.
discretionary
because that
review.
would be spot zoning. I think I remember city attorney said spot zoning is discouraged.
We're talking about a general plan amendment, not a spot zoning.
That's spot zoning. If we rezone general plan, use general plan amendment to rezone a site, that's spot zoning.
It depends on what the amendment is for. But we could have a follow-up conversation on
So
Planning
I think
101. More than
city
happy to
attorney
have that.
Want to comment on?
Only to say that, I mean, the basic requirement is that the general plan and zoning have to be consistent. So if one is changed, the other is changed. Spot zoning is discouraged, but it's not per se illegal. And so, you know, that type of rezoning is not impossible.
Okay.
Okay, I think it's, we should go with the motion and, but Councilmember Wei, you had a comment?
Yeah, just a quick question. So without this gateway process,
public comments
it's
too.
sort of, if I remember correctly, I wasn't on council, but I remember this was approved. It goes back to the sort of a regular process. If I'm interested in building something, I come to the planning and said, is this general plan conforming? And then the staff will give then advices. But that doesn't preclude or prevent the developers to talk to different council members.
That's correct.
Right? As soon as we make that clear and announce it,
The
that'll
ex
be-
parte process,
yeah.
yes. That's
The
correct.
developers can talk to council members as long as a quorum of council members do not talk amongst
Right.
themselves, correct?
So I think if they want to kind of get a council members feeling of these projects, so they can talk to us individually. That doesn't prevent them from doing that.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, thank you.
We should actually go to public comments now. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak?
Yes, Mayor, I have 2 requests to speak in Community Hall, and I see 1 hand raised virtually. We have Jennifer Griffin and Greg Endem.
Okay.
Welcome, Jennifer.
Good evening, City Council. I sent emails about this. I'm not so against changing it, but I don't really feel comfortable doing this on the night that we did the housing element, because there's a lot of things that I still feel confused about, and I don't know what is instigating this. I did notice that 2 of the projects that were listed, one of them is Mandarin Gourmet, which is involved with the, oh my God, that marina, which has not been built yet. And then the other one is on Bandley, which I'm really concerned that we're jumping the horse over the cart before we're hitching it to the cart. Are we going to just let developers predict what our city policy will become? I mean, because somebody wanted to have the general plan amendments changed, they're going to dictate what happens in the city. This is what I'm getting, this is what I'm hearing. I was here in 2015 when this whole complicated general plan amendment submittal situation, and yes, the hotels were involved, the Vidovich Hotel, and then I don't think it was the other hotel, there was something else. They went through it. The developers had to, it was like, it's like what we're going to see it's what we're going to see at the Olympics that Bruce Springsteen's daughter is doing. It's called stadium jumping. And this is what they had to do. And the good thing about it was, and I think it was Artie, she was the city manager, I believe that there was enough time spent that the entire public participated and we all understood. There were charts and graphs. They spent days on this. And the beauty of that is the public understood what was going on. The developers did too. It was like a horse race. Yes, but I respect the fact that at the time the staff thought this was a good way of dealing with things. And I'm a firm believer in we don't want to throw out things that other staff members had brought in, particularly city managers. Artie went on to have a very nice career in Mountain View, and I think she recently retired. But on the heels of what happened today, I do not feel comfortable deciding this in one night, because I don't really understand what will happen if we throw this out. I know what happens now, but if we get rid of it, what happens? And this is again, I'll take it as a gentle criticism. We're throwing the public into the maelstream by not letting them know what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Greg Endem. Welcome, Greg.
Good evening, Mayor Mohan, council members. My name is Greg Endem, and I represent the owners of the Marina Plaza Shopping Center. As a longtime property owner in Cupertino and someone who is involved in developing residential housing, we support staff's recommendation, which will streamline the general plan amendment process. As a community that is striving to see more housing built within its borders, and for a city that has just endured the arduous process updating its housing element plan, the proposed change to the general plan amendment process works towards the goal of streamlining, not lengthening, the possibility of creating more housing in the community. Under the revised process and pre-2015 protocol, any applicant proposing a general plan amendment must demonstrate in their application the community benefits and substantiate the request for the general plan amendment. This is not changing. The opportunity for public input and comment is not changing. What is changing is eliminating an extra step and freeing up both staff's time and the council's time to focus on more important things in running the city. The general plan amendment process is not going away. The change is to simply focus on analyzing the main event and eliminating the preseason activities. I had a boss that used to use sports analogies all the time, and I got real tired of them, but that kind of worked out. Applicants can and must focus on the main goal of providing benefits to the community as part of their request. This can be done more efficiently without the extra step. While the risk of not succeeding always in the general plan amendment process falls on the applicant, this added step of the authorization process muddies the waters. Under the proposed resolution, this is my notes, but as to Councilmember Moore and Chow's comments about giving the applicant an early read, the applicant is the one who needs to bear the risk and make its case. Any applicant undertaking such a proposal as a general plan amendment is experienced and can completely evaluate the process without the need for an additional indicator such as the authorization step. In 9 years, the lengthier process has been used 9 times. I would applaud staff for bringing you this proposal. It's rare that we see a city that tries to be more efficient instead of adding more bureaucracy. So, thank you.
Thank you, Greg. And now we have one requester virtually, San R. Welcome, San.
Good evening, Mayor Mohan and City Council members. I asked what was the urgency to bring this in today on a day that's packed with other agenda items? What was the urgency to make this decision at 10:30 in the night when restaurants are not paying attention? And what was the need to do this without getting first input from your planning commissioners, who are the ones being disempowered and disenfranchised because of this change? The Planning Commission allows for a first step for formal community input. I dread to think of the day when we have to route community input solely through Ben Fu. Weeks have passed and Ben Fu has not replied to mails. You're lucky if you can get a reply from Ben Fu as a resident. It is impossible to get replies from community development. And we are going to now have residents having to go through community development to give input. The Planning Commission is the place where residents are represented through fellow residents. in the form of commissioners. It is a place where interactive input is given, and commissioners and the chair and vice chair can ask questions and go back and forth. It is a place where deliberation provides checks and balances. Bear in mind that a planning commission may have been appointed by a former council, and barring unprecedented events like what was done last year in replacing the majority on the planning commission, barring such acts, the planning commission provides some checks and balances because a majority on the planning commission may differ from the majority on a city council. Taking away this step from planning commission disenfranchises and disengages the community. You're reducing public participation. You're reducing transparency. Why have a general plan at all? You can get rid of it. Perhaps that's what you want. We've seen throughout the night today and throughout your term that you have consistently aligned against residents that have asked for preserving the character of Cupertino. You have consistently aligned with YIMBY groups. And let me remind you once again that the YIMBY candidate on the council dais won by only 444 votes. 444 votes separated this majority from a different majority. Let me also say that you're impacting environmental impacts by making this change. Residents can raise environmental concerns. They can bring up concerns around the strain on infrastructure. Discussions that can happen at an early stage that provides for resident input is now being silenced. It can lead to uneven development without having to formally seek an amendment to the general plan. Developers can take short.
Thank you, Sam. That is your time. Mayor, no additional speakers for this item.
Okay. So that ends the public comments part of this item. Let's bring it back to council. Comments and motion, comments and or motion. Councilmember Moore.
So I appreciate the last comments regarding having this item go to the Planning Commission, and I agree with it, actually. They really did need to get a look at this. There's no reason to pass this so hastily. But there was one thing that was brought up in particular that I would want to see added on for comments from the Planning Commission, and that is with regards to the community benefits. Because I've seen developers utilize community benefits in a way, sometimes it's good, and provides some community benefit that's equitable for the community, and sometimes those community benefits have been created in a way that certain groups would benefit specifically, and then those certain groups would lobby for the developer's project in a way that can create and has created some bad feelings within the community for people who maybe were not liking a certain project. And so I would want to see, my recommendation for this council is that we ask that the Planning Commission review this proposal and add on that they look at community benefits, just like you have here shown in the attachment D, that they review what those and any other community developments that projects have had. There was Valco had them as well, and provide their input on whether or not those are working well, and if there are some other, if there's a way to, kind of like how we do the community grant funding, if there's a way to have a analysis so that we can provide the developer with some guidelines for what kind of community development, community benefits we want to see them provide, and what we basically don't want to see moving forward. So I can't support this as it's written tonight, and I do think the Planning Commission needs to be involved.
Vice Mayor Fruin. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Chow.
I'm conflicted because I opposed this resolution when it was adopted. But the value of this is that it does get the public engaged and informed about request for general plan amendment rather than having applicant contact each council member individually in private behind closed doors. The public would know ahead of time, okay, amendment to the general plan is requested. I like that part, but the community benefits part, I think, has a lot of issues. So I'm conflicted, but I'd like to first clarify. This item has nothing to do with housing element. I hope that we are not considering to repeal this because of housing element, because the whole purpose of housing element is to adopt a general plan and zoning that allow housing. And bring this item as part of that sounds like, oh, our housing element is not enough. We would need to rely on amendment, more changes to general plan to allow more housing. That's misunderstanding, misperception about housing element. So I really think this shouldn't be brought together. This shouldn't even be mentioned in the same sentence. And also that there was an earlier conception. It's good that the staff report did not mention housing element. There was earlier conception that this was needed because SB 330 limits the number of meetings. For good that this is not mentioned in the staff report, because the number of meetings limited under SB 330 applies only for the projects that do not require general plan amendment. It's all for the project that comply with the current standard. So general plan amendments should be rare and really necessary. That said, I wish there is potential to bring, so that we don't have to learn about a potential change to general plan at the very last, when the council already have to approve a project. A lot of times I really like a project, but it's not complying with the general plan. That's making it hard because some people comply with everything and some people trying to break the rules. Then it feels like it's really unfair. So I'm not sure.
Vice Mayor Fruin?
So I'll just confirm again, we are not eliminating the process of a general plan amendment, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And then to the city attorney, we are required to have a general plan per the government code, correct?
That's correct.
All right. So we will have a general plan and we will continue to have the ability to make general plan amendments. End of story. I understand the city manager's comment with respect to this being a companion issue, the housing element, from this standpoint, which is that if you go back to our discussion when we adopted the housing element, there was an unusual point of law that HCD had determined, which is that a pipeline project is a pipeline project is a pipeline project and cannot be counted in any other way. So you don't really have the option through the housing element of rezoning a site and increasing its density or changing other development standards. It's just kind of stuck. So the only way that you're going to be able to facilitate a pipeline project, which we have an obligation to do through the housing element, may actually be to go through a general plan amendment process. And I think we have a few pipeline projects that may well be stuck in that situation. Overall, I don't think that we need an extra veto point in this system. And it bothers me that we are impinging upon a fundamental right, a due process right to actually apply, because someone could get stuck in an endless cycle of asking for permission and then never actually getting to go anywhere. It makes the entire general plan amendment process look illusory. So I I understand some of the concerns about wanting to get an early look. I think there are methods that we can use to make that happen, whether it's encouraging a would-be applicant to talk to council members or encouraging them to find a way to do early noticing so that they can have community workshops on the topic and find out how people feel. But I don't want to impose too much additional cost on something that is supposed to be available and that ultimately ought to help the whole city. I do like the idea of referring the question of community benefits at some point to the Planning Commission, because I think that it is useful to have that conversation in a more public place so that we've all bought in on what they are, rather than it just being something that looks like it answers a council member's pet project or something like that. But with that, I will conclude my comments for the moment. I have 2 minutes left.
I had a question for Director Fu. The fact that this has come before us today, does it have anything to do with the timing of the housing element, or was that purely a coincidence?
It doesn't have anything to do directly with the housing element. I mean, the council was dark in August, and so this is the earliest that we can possibly bring the item forward.
Okay. So the timing had nothing to do with the housing element. My other question was, I think somewhere in the staff report you said that this new streamlined procedure was consistent with industry standards and maybe state requirements.
Not new. So the GPA, the General Plan Amendment process, is a standard process according to California Government Code section. So that's a standard process. The GPA process, the authorization process, is not a standard depending on each city.
Right. And I think one comment that I probably heard at the study session was that this was consistent with the procedures used by other cities around us.
Yeah, I think it's most cities in the Bay Area and also in California do not have a gatekeeper process. And I'll also just clarify that our current gatekeeper process, authorization process, does not require the project to go to Planning Commission. Project will come straight to City Council. That does not have a Planning Commission review process in the current authorization process.
Okay. That was, let's see, who's next? Councilmember Wei?
Thank you, Mayor. So are we asking questions or making comments? I think making comments, right?
Yes.
So I remember vividly this, when 2015 this was passed. It's more concentrated on community benefits. If they want to do a general plan amendment, what would council would love to have community benefits. But it doesn't mean when the council approved and that they're going to, the project is going to be approved. Actually, the project has to start over again with this regular process. Is that correct?
That's correct. Also, if I may add, in that discussion of community benefits with the council and the authorization process, it does have that perception of a quid pro quo, and that was discussed at the podium, which makes it a little bit challenging. And so the project does have to revise based on comments received and come back through the process again.
Right. So what I'm trying to say is it was like Councilmember Charles said, she was once, in it, approved it. We tried it, the council tried it, it didn't work. It looks like it's more cumbersome than is necessary. And we are just going back to the original regulatory process. We're not inventing anything new.
We're not, that's correct.
Okay. And the second comment I want to make is we make this kind of decisions at this time pretty much a lot of times. So I don't think the five of us are falling asleep or anything. We have clear-headed and we do know what we're doing. So we tried it, the council tried it for how many years? 9 years. It didn't work. I think it's time we go back to the regular process where a lot of cities are doing and make sure that, yes, I do want to agree with Councilmember Chow's concern. Maybe the public should know it a little earlier, so maybe we can encourage any developers to do more community outreach earlier so that the project is more visible. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Moore.
Thank you. So I'm looking at the Mountain View link that we were provided. Their gatekeeper process, and that's where our previous head of community development went. Their gatekeeper process says to consider a development project with a legislative update, a zoning, precise plan, and or general plan map or text amendment or transfer of development rights related to the citywide school strategy. A public hearing is required by the City Council to authorize submission of an application based on current staff resources. The authorization process is referred to as a gatekeeper project or the gatekeeper process. No formal development application with these types of legislative amendments or TDRs can be submitted for City staff review until City Council has approved authorization at a public hearing. And then they have a number of exempt legislative amendments. So my comments that, having served on the Planning Commission and chaired it, seeing this type of an agenda item would have definitely been in the purview of the Planning Commission. And we have some very experienced commissioners, the chair, David Fung, we have a former mayor, Commissioner Stephen Scharf, and Commissioner Matty Patla was previously on Bike PED. He's been working on commissions for a number of years. I would, let me just make the motion. I move that we direct staff to bring this item to the Planning Commission with the community benefits issue for discussion and recommendation to the City Council. Hopefully I get a second.
Councilmember Chow, your light is on.
Yeah, I don't think we should refer this to Planning Commission, but I do have another proposal on that.
Just to clarify, is there a second for Councilmember Moore's motion?
No. So, first a question. Would public hearing on a general plan amendment subject to the 5 meeting limit of SB 330?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, that's good to know. And I agree with Councilmember Wei that we could try to encourage more community outreach. So I wonder, what if we require community outreach for a general plan amendment? Maybe applicant who requests a general plan amendment should conduct a community meeting to collect public input on the project before the project before any amendment request comes to the Planning Commission and the City Council. Is that a valid legal request to require?
I think potentially yes. I think it's something that we would look into. I think that would probably take a future agenda item to properly consider.
Mm-hmm. So, not public hearing, but conduct a community meeting.
Right. No, I understand I understand the request, and I think I've seen that process in other jurisdictions. So I would suspect it's legal, but we would obviously want to look into that.
When it comes to the Planning Commission or the Council, we would have more public input on the amendment.
Right. Yeah. So we'd have to look at that, particularly with respect to housing projects, to make sure that we were not running afoul of any timelines required under state law. But but certainly I would believe that would be a future agenda item that council could request.
Oh, okay. So my motion would be to consider this potential outreach requirement. Should we do this before we repeal the process? I'm not sure. Could we say that we encourage this process? We'll repeal it today, but before we adopt a formal process that's encouraged. the applicant to do this.
Yeah, so I don't think that second part is agendized for action today. So what I might suggest is whatever action council wants to take on the staff recommendation today, or take no action, that we could address that today, and then if you and another council member wish to require a future agenda item to that effect, it could be put on the future agenda items list.
Okay, but that won't come back until 3 months later, I think.
So you'd be subject to the same process we use with other future agenda items, correct?
Okay.
Okay, so Vice Mayor Fruin?
I'll move the staff recommended action.
Okay. Councilmember Wei?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Councilmember Moore, you had a last comment?
Yeah, I have a question.
2 minutes, please.
A question. So if a project had gone through the general plan amendment process, and it had been approved, and then the applicant no longer wants to do that
2 minutes,
project,
please.
and
Sorry.
they want to do a different one, and perhaps they want more residential units, or they want more office space or something beyond what the general plan has for them, would they then need to go through, currently, before this is changed, would they go through the gatekeeper process again? That if this isn't passed, would that happen?
I'm not sure we ever had a project like that, but just thinking with the current process, where there is an authorization, I don't believe it will. It depends on the severity of the change. So in that example that Councilman Moore mentioned, we'll have to look at is that a different project, or is it a modified project? So if the project is a modified project, then if it's a new project, then it'll come through the authorization again, where council review and provide an authorization to submit a general plan amendment. But if it's a modification to an approved project, just like a use permit process, it'll be a modified project, wouldn't have to come through the authorization process again.
Okay, so I'd like to make a substitute motion that we move the recommended action and direct staff to have the Planning Commission review the community benefits and provide feedback on any modifications to the City Council.
Okay, so do we have a second for the substitute motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Okay, so
So
did you have a quick comment, Councilmember Chow? 1 minute, please.
So should I ask for a second for the future agenda item on the public?
You could do that at any time.
now,
Or you could do that. You could do that at any time. If we could certainly talk about that outside the meeting, or if somebody wants to second it from the dais, they could.
So I can ask for a second now.
Yeah, but
Okay.
I think briefly it would be good.
Is there a second for a future agenda item to consider a requirement of community meeting be for any general plan, for any project that would require general plan amendment, so that when it comes to the planning commission or city council, we have community input on the amendment. And as the city attorney mentioned, other cities have similar process, so we could look at what other cities have in the process.
Right, as part of any agenda item that would come back, of course, those issues would be researched, yes.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for Councilmember Chow.
No, that's not the motion.
No, that's not a motion.
That's not a motion.
That's the
Second
future
is
agenda.
enough.
Yeah, that's the future.
There's a substitute motion made by Councilmember Moore and seconded by Vice Mayor Fruin that is on the floor.
Okay, could you repeat your motion, Councilmember Moore?
Kristen?
A substitute motion for council to move the recommended action and to direct staff to have the planning commission review the community benefits and provide feedback on any modifications to the city council.
Okay. Got it?
May I ask a question? I am confused. What do you mean by provide feedback on any? I'm not sure what you're asking the planning commissioners to do.
Through the mayor, I'd like to hear some feedback regarding the community benefits. We have a number of amenities that have been offered over the years. Sometimes those offerings, because they can benefit a certain group, that certain group then comes and advocates specifically for the project. And so we want to have harmonious relationships within the city and have some sort of metrics so that when the community benefits are suggested, are we looking at how many people will be served across the community, similar to community grant funding? That's the kind of feedback I'd like to hear. You know, if they don't see it as an issue, then that would be feedback just as well. But I'd like to see some analysis of this, and if there are some community benefits we value more than others, I think that would be helpful for the developer overall. So, for instance,
okay, I got it.
Okay.
To me, they sound like two separate items.
So,
Mayor.
So I guess I've just said I think that Councilmember Moore's motion is germane to this item because certainly the purpose of one of the purposes of the general plan amendment process was to evaluate community benefits, and if we are going to discard that process, it is not unreasonable to to have a discussion about a replacement.
Okay.
I have a question.
Councilmember Chow, you had one last question?
Just so the current resolution, community benefits, is in relation to general plan amendment. So what you are proposing is likely on any project which may or may not require general plan amendment, but in case they want to offer for goodwill a voluntary community benefit, what we would like to see in Cupertino so that project applicant who would like to offer good gesture benefits have some guideline to follow. Is that the idea? It doesn't have to be related to a general plan amendment, right? So we are decoupling.
Through the mayor, please. I would take staff advice on that. I just want to point out from the recommendation from the staff report, they state that community benefits proposed by projects have been inconsistent and have not necessarily provided the intended benefits. So anything we can do to help improve that process, and I think it'll help the developers and the members of the public when they see this in the future. So again, going back to Councilmember Chow's points, I'd want to hear some advice from staff on whether that would be added.
Yeah, and I think the broad referral is appropriate because it would give both staff and the planning commission some room to look at the issue broadly and make informed recommendations.
Okay, so the first part of your recommendation, Councilmember Moore, is
it's just to approve the recommended action and then direct staff in a broad sense to bring community benefits to the Planning Commission for discussion and recommendations to City Council.
Okay.
Good.
We have a motion and we have a second, right? Yeah. Okay, so let's vote by lights then on Councilmember Moore's motion. Councilmember Way, you need to.
Moore's substitute motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Okay, so that concludes our regular items, and now we have to get.
So we do have one item that was pulled from the consent calendar. So we would need a motion to hear that item. So certainly council could make that motion. I mean, another option. I mean, since perhaps there were questions about the consent calendar item that were not addressed. we could take it, we could get those questions and attempt to address them before July 9th to, if they're still not addressed, of course, we could hear the item at that time.
And if I can just add one more, the reason the entire staff is here is because the internal audit work program touches on every department. So in an effort to try to streamline the questions, I would really appreciate if there are certain questions that we can answer in advance. Just looking at my Parks and Rec department director and also others just sitting there waiting for this item to be heard tonight.
So we're talking about the item that was pulled from consent.
That's correct.
If you want to hear it tonight, you would need a motion.
Okay,
yes.
I move that we hear item number 5 tonight.
Yeah, I'll second it. Should we have to vote by lights? Okay.
The motion carries unanimously.
Okay. All right. So, Councilmember Chow, you had asked for this item to be pulled. Did you have a brief statement?
A community member asked this item to be pulled. He thinks that these items should be discussed by the council since several recommendations were made based on the audit report. So I don't know if that community member is still on the line. I do have some questions on some of the recommendations. The city staff says the city is not in agreement, so if I could get some insight on that, would be great.
Go ahead and ask your questions.
Yeah. There were
public comments first.
No, yeah. And then there were a number of disagreement that staff had with Moss Adams. Would you like us to walk you through individually, or there was specific question?
So I highlighted this, some of them. So I'm sharing the screen. This is for the library expansion project. So recommendation is to prevent incurring excessive fee markups. The city should pursue cost recovery of markups. It says the city is not in agreement, so I don't quite understand the reasons.
We can explain this. So both.
Yeah, I can go through the list for library expansion first. The other one is. It's recommended that the city should request that the design build entity obtain the necessary documentation from its subcontractors and sub-consultants to secure the rights of use for the city, because I don't think our current contract require that, especially for public records, public documents for records. And here it says city not in agreement. It mentions some contract, but then I do think our current requirement is not sufficient.
So just kind of to wrap it up, so all of our reasons are included at the last column. So there is an explanation why the city staff is not in agreement.
Yeah, but I agree with the recommendation. So if we would like the recommendation to be followed,
we can certainly take your note, but we're not in agreement with the recommendation. And the reason stated is in the column D.
So why couldn't we follow the recommendation, for example, for just including the language in the contract that we would...
We can certainly address this one in particular, but
what's the difficulty in requiring that?
I mean, I think part of this issue is that the auditors didn't really understand the applicable law.
The applicable law, but then I thought whether it's required by law, I thought it's a good recommendation that we get these necessary documentation from subcontractors and sub-consultants.
We can certainly hear from Public Works, but there is a reason that we don't agree. But more than happy to have Chet walk you through.
We can discuss this really quickly. For this second one here, we disagreed because that language is already in the contract. Why do we need to revise the contract when it's already there? We just they didn't understand that issue for this one. And then
just a minute. So your explanation says there is ownership right. So it only mentions about we have the right, but it does not require all the documentation to be obtained.
There is no documentation. The ownership, the contract vests the ownership right in the city. I mean, their contract is the documentation.
It says the design build entity should obtain the necessary documentation. I thought
this was a nonsense finding. It was just wrong as a matter of law.
Okay, and then for this one, it says we should prevent incurring excess fee markup. So we should pursue cost recovery.
I'll defer to the Director of Public Works on that one.
Yeah, and I'll defer to Susan. She was knee-deep in that one. She can handle that one very well.
Thank you, council members, for your questions. The change orders, in particular, this was a case where Moss Adams reviewed the entire project, and in a sense, they were trying to make a policy out of a singular case, and we didn't believe it was appropriate to make a policy out of that example. In this case, it's a design-build entity, which isn't something we do very often. There was a change order, and they said that we didn't pursue the markup on the change order appropriately. We disagreed, and the contract was structured in a way that backed us up on that particular item.
So there was an increase in cost, and then Moss Adams thinks there shouldn't be a markup.
In this case, the item in question was a change order credit. They were trying to credit. The contractor gave us a $35,000 credit. What they didn't document was the markup on that credit, but it was appropriately documented in that it was a lump sum contract, and without going into the details,
what markup means.
When a contractor has a cost, there's usually a markup of 5% or something like that in the standard industry norms that covers the administrative costs, as well as there's insurance and other things like that.
Okay. This is the other item that's this one's not in agreement, but it says ongoing. I think I had a question. So it says the CIP division uses a variety of tools to report project progress. Staff note that there are barriers to effectively communicating program needs and trade-offs to the city leadership. And then the recommendation is to establish an annual CIP report detailing project progress, prior year expenditure, and CIP accomplishment to effectively communicate opportunities and challenges to the stakeholders, and correct the data accuracy issue in the community-facing dashboard. So I thought that's a good idea. And the under the last column, the staff mentions, there is a quality financial report. That's a different thing. So if we can have a CIP progress report, it seems to be that's recommended to have a CIP progress report. And the staff noted that they would like a venue to effectively communicate.
I believe that we also have the progress on our dashboard, on our CIP dashboard.
Very minimal, though.
We can certainly expand it, but the progress is updated on the dashboard.
It was the staff who noted that more effective communication method is necessary. So does the staff now does not think more effective method could be?
Councilmember Chow, I think that I would need to go back to the report from 2022 and look at the context for that comment. I don't have that at hand. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I could get back to you on that one.
Okay.
But I have been putting out quarterly CIP reports along with the budget updates, as well as the annual report.
Okay. So it feels like the staff thought there is a need for more effective communication. And the Q1 financial report has been there, but it doesn't seem to have been effective. So if you can get back
You're
to me
sort
on
of
that,
out
that
of
would
time,
be great.
Councilmember Chow. If staff will get back to Councilmember Chow.
We didn't get any questions, so if we can get some questions from Councilmember Chow, that'll be very appreciated.
Right, that's true.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to remind all of us, when we pull items from the consent calendar, we do need to have a reason for pulling them. Just makes it easier for staff to respond to our reasons for pulling them. And that didn't happen this time. Okay.
There
All right,
was
Councilmember Moore, you had a
just
comment?
To
Excuse me.
clarify, it's a public request. So,
Councilmember Moore?
Thank you. So I did not pull the item, but I really want to thank staff for sticking around to answer any questions on it. Thank you for the responses. When I looked at this, I see so much really good work that's happened already. I love seeing all this. Did the city agree with their report? What's the status? It's completed, and there's a number of these. As I flip through, there's only a couple that had any disagreement. You've already explained what the disagreement was over and made and clarified that. That's great. And like I'd said before, with regards to the improvement process, this is part of it, and it looks to me like things are moving in the right direction. There wasn't perhaps as much information around the procurement officer and the improvements that are going on there. And I don't know if the table indicates that there's training going on with procurement across the city staff. So that's really good information for the public, and I look at this as a really good thing moving forward, and keep it up.
Okay. Seeing no other comments, do we have a motion to receive the
I believe we have to take public comment on this item too, Mayor, if there is any.
Okay. Any public comments on this item?
Mayor, I see no hands raised virtually, and I have received no requests to speak in Community Hall on this
Okay,
item.
so there are no public comments. Let's bring it back to council. Seeing no other comments, is there a motion to accept the staff report? Council Member Way?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion and we have a second. Councilmember Chow, last comment?
one of the comments
1 minute, please.
says we will have a strategic goal meeting in early 2025. So that's council goal setting?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay. All right, let's vote by lights.
The motion carries unanimously.
Great. Thank you. That is the end. That concludes our council meeting for today. And this meeting is adjourned.